Fantastic. Welcome to everyone once again, even though we've just been speaking anyway. If you want to start off by introducing yourselves, I think we can start wherever. Yeah.
Should I start, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Andrew Hogan. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm agent for change at the Arts Council of Wales, and I'm also the main organiser for BLM Gwent as well.
I don't think I can top that. My name's Sienna Crowson. I'm the Welsh translator officer, performance officer for Urban Circle. I'm also a singer, and I'm in full-time education at Cardiff and Vale College at the moment.
I'm Naz. I'm a socially engaged artist, Newport Fusion coordinator, and creative consultant.
Chris Porter, project coordinator for Urban Circle, and also a youth worker with Newport City Council, which I have been for the past 20 years.
My name is Abu-Bakr Shabazz. I'm an educational consultant for the Welsh Government on new curriculum. I'm also a historian. I specialise in Black and African history from the beginning of time right up to the contemporary. I'm also a comparative sociologist, and I'm also a trained psychotherapist as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andy Newell. I work at Lamwen High School. I'm the area lead of expressive arts.
Hi, I am Nyla, and I'm senior youth worker for Urban Circle and a creative practitioner as well as a full-time mum.
I'm Zanea and I'm still in school and I go John Frost.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And my name is Onisma Malanga. I'm the creative arts curator for Urban Circle and also G Expressions, kind of connecting up our younger generation with the older alongside creative arts in any way, shape or form. I already gave you an overview about what today's about. So what I'll start by doing is, don't feel attacked if I ask you a question directly. So we can even start with yourself, Chris, in terms of how do you view the current Welsh education system?
From the outside looking in, it's quite clear there's not much black teachers. And talking to young people, they're saying that there's not much black education outside slavery. Which, for me, going forward, I don't think that is quite the only way that we can get black history into education is through slavery. There are other means, and black people's history is quite unique before slavery, but it's not spoken about. Certainly in my experience, when I went to school quite a long time ago, there was no black education other than slavery. And I think it's important now that we do sort of turn the tide. It's kind of awkward to talk about it as black history because you want to include, or don't want to feel that it's just a separatism sort of thing and just focusing on one group of people. But I just think black history is important in world history. And I think there are gaps in world history that have been missed out. It might be controversial to say, but it's been missed out in the effort to erase black people out of history. And that's my view at the moment, I think.
I find it interesting that you said that. Me and Zanea were having a conversation earlier, and I was asking her, because Zanea's in year 10 in school now, and I was asking her what she knows about black education or being in high school. And I mean, your answer was pretty much the same, that all she knows about is slavery.
Yeah. I run youth clubs, and I often ask young people from all races, where is Egypt, what continent does Egypt sit on? And they don't seem to know. And you tell them that it's Africa, they seem genuinely shocked that it could possibly. And you think, my God, how can we be in 2022 when these young people are in school, but something as basic as that seems to be overlooked? And historically, we've got to think that there was a reason behind Egypt sort of being removed from Africa. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that's so simplistic, but it's missing in our young people's education.
As education, how do you see it being missed out in the community alongside that as well?
Well, I think if it's not in school, then it's going to be very difficult for it to then translate into the communities. If you're being, and it's not just the way black people are being educated, it's the way the rest of the population are being educated. And if you're educated in a way to kind of put one race of people at the bottom of society that perpetuates itself right throughout your communities then. Why would your communities behave any differently? So I think the lack of black education in the schools does have a negative impact on communities.
How do you view that as well, Andy?
Yeah, a lot of what I just heard rings true with me. I'll kind of give you a little bit of a background of perhaps why I'm here today, and kind of my journey. I think, firstly, to get this right, we're going to need kind of education for teachers currently in the system, because just picking up, we've not been taught, you know, black history as such. I went through a schooling system where it wasn't mentioned, you know. So there's got to be some element of education there for teachers, which is happening at our school, Lamb High School. Shan Smith, the deputy head, put on a diversity conference, and it wasn't a one-size-fits-all, or you could pick which element you went to, and it is fascinating, you know, and we learned so much there. So just if schools started off by doing that first of all, that would be really, really helpful. But we also need to educate ourselves as well. So for a long time now, I went down a route of I trained classically, musician. I was along my brothers. I was first generation to go to university, and I was from a white working class background. And when I went to university, and when I went to study classical music, there weren't many people who came from like the area that I did. You know, a lot of people came from very privileged backgrounds. So it was quite odd, really, when I went there. And so for some time now, I've kind of thought that route it probably isn't the best route anymore to study music. Not for everyone. It's certainly not an inclusive route. So within my music curriculum, I've been really wanted to kind of make a change and go away a little bit from those classical traditions, encompass more different types of music. And this is where it's just been fantastic for music and allowing or being able to include, you know, black culture within my curriculum. It's easy, really, because I started to look at, well, how firstly, looking at our learners, you know, from in my school is ethnic minority, very small. So it's predominantly white working class area, quite deprived area, I would say. And I think, well, they're not being taught violin from 8 years old, that, you know, like in some areas, and then when they come into our school, trying to go down that route is very difficult for a lot of them. So I need to think, right, what way can we go? So I want to go down a lot more the oral traditions, which is, you know, enriched in black culture, isn't it? You know, from African drumming to singing, and then going on to blues, and then going on to rhythm and blues, and then going on to soul music, following through then to, you know, the expansive world of R&B and rap music and hip-hop music. You know, it's all there for me. So I started to learn about that. I started to learn about music production and ways that I could teach without going down the kind of traditional, this is notation route. And it's just opened up a world to me. So beforehand, within my curriculum, it was blues music. So music which would encompass black culture would be blues music, and we talk about slavery, just like you said. And that was me kind of done on that. Now, luckily, I did a project with Cynefin, with a guy called Joe Roberts, and we spoke about different ways to include black culture in my curriculum. And so we decided we're going to do a project on hip-hop music over lockdown. I spent lockdown just learning how to use music production, so I did numerous courses in this. You know, I don't play trombone anymore. I try and make music in music production. You know, over the last 2 years I haven't touched it because I just love this new way of making music. So I'm going off. Sorry, I'm talking way too much here.
No, it's fine. It's good.
So basically, I guess my point is then we developed this new project, and the pupils learn how to write beats. They learn how to write rap music, hip hop music. Sorry. We learned about the history of hip hop, and suddenly it just kind of opened loads of doors into to black history, really. And even in that short period from 1980s onward, there's so much history within that they can learn about. So, you know, just instead of now having in my curriculum slavery and oppression, looking at, it's hard to say, of course, it's a negative point of view, we can now look at the ingenuity of in the 1980s when the Roland 808 drum machine came out, and everyone bought it because they thought it was going to be the best thing and best sounding thing. And then when these rich music producers heard it, it didn't sound anything like a drum kit, and they just disposed of them or got rid of them at charity shops and sold them for cheap. And then all these black music producers kind of found these 808 machines, and they just made amazing beats from them, and they suddenly they didn't have to rely on like disco records for their beats. They can make their own beats, and look at the ingenuity there. It's fantastic. So we talk a lot about that, talk a lot about within Caribbean music, all the oil drums left over from military base in the Caribbean, and what did they do with those? They turned them into instruments, So we're really looking at ingenuity, and it's put a whole new spin on our curriculum, and also kind of guided it in a different direction from the traditional route now. And so we learn a lot about beat making and do an awful lot about music production. We learn a lot more orally, music orally as well. And actually, I think it's probably setting our pupils up, if they want to follow music for a career, to a much wider scope than just going and learning to play a classical instrument and going down that route. And there's a lot more jobs now in music production. The music industry is huge. So I think of hopefully opening up to a lot more opportunities for my pupils.
And it's vast, isn't it? The what we're getting from music is vast. So how vital is it for you, Abu-Bakr, as well? Touching on everything that Andy just said, how vital is it that we do incorporate into the entire curriculum? Because of course we've always focused on music. There's always been that attention when it comes into music, when it's education about history. But then, how many other subjects have we got within the school?
Yeah, they should be immersed in throughout the whole curriculum, because music in itself is a form of literacy, it's a form of communication, and that's what we should not forget. So if you look at the slave element or the slave experience, for instance, especially in the Americas, and I include the Caribbean islands as well, you found that drums were used as a form of communication amongst the slaves to rebel, etc. We have to realize that music was just more than entertainment. It was a way of rallying people for social, political, economic change. And I think that's important. And if we're looking at the areas of learning and experience, I think it needs to be highlighted in all the different spectrums of that, So expressive arts is one, the humanities, even health and well-being. So you can see how it could weave itself from an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary perspective and have a positive impact on the minds of the new generation. I think this is what will come out of it. And to know that music should not just be static and put into this pigeonhole or box. Like I said, it's a form of communication. And that is what's really important. Obviously, you're looking at lyrics and dance and poetry and all these other things which may encircle that. But it needs to be much wider. As a consultant, one of the things that I always say to people is that I want to prepare the young minds for the 22nd century. We now live in an age where youngsters, for the first time in history, are more in tune with technology and technological advancement than ever before. And it's how to tune that mind for them to bring out the genius or the dexterity which is within them in order to propel them as business entrepreneurs. If not them, their children or their grandchildren. And I think this is what's important. This pigeonholing of certain ethnic groups or groups of people that they can only do, especially if you look at the educational system now, most of the middle-class white teachers, when they go into a classroom, because many of them never had a black teacher, they don't have black friends, black colleagues, and the list just goes on. When they go into an educational system, they see black and brown students, there's a particular perception they have. And most of that perception is based upon negativity and what the media have said, not through their own personal interactions with certain people. So their expectations is going to be low, and what they seem to do, and I can speak as a teaching practitioner, is that they seem to like to focus black and brown pupils on music, sports, and drama, which is a form of entertainment. Okay? What about the entrepreneurial field? It's like, sorry, I forgot your name, but things with Andy, what Andy was just saying now, looking at broadening that spectrum in a sense. And what I mean by that is that why can't youngsters feel they can be directors and producers, entrepreneurs, CEOs of companies? Because when we look at our music, it's been exploited by a certain group of people who's making millions and trillions of us, and we can't go into that. We're just artists. We need to reclaim what belongs to us. It comes out of our suffering. If you look at jazz, jazz comes from a Mandinka word, which means to move. When we look at blues, it's about our sadness, and listless soul, it's about what's in our heart. It's all about suffering. Okay, this is what music is really and truly about. So, so even if we don't understand history or know history, we know that the different types of music, genres, actually has a way of representing what we've gone through in the past. And it's unfortunate that it's being exploited by certain people. And sometimes the essence of what that exploitation or that feeling was about is sometimes lost in the narrative because of corporate business worlds. It's taken into a new direction. But the thing is, coming back to the curriculum, I've always argued, I've been arguing for curricular change for over 30 years. Because the type of curriculum I had, I was born in Barry, I grew up in Cardiff, I went through the educational system. I was a precocious child, but because even though they gave me the title, I was educationally subnormal and I was top of my class, this freaked out teachers at the time. You know, I wasn't supposed to be intelligent at the top of my class as a West Indian boy, you know. And the thing about that, I was denied a decent education, but I had a colonial education. I come from grandparents, I got 4 grandparents, only one of them was able to read and write out of 3 because the British, when they were in the Caribbean, they denied certain sectors of the black community from literacy, you know? So for me, I'm trying to look for changes. I know what pupils are going through, being in the educational system. It is a colonial education, and it has a tendency to deny or to reject or to restrict the narratives of other groups of people, even if they're positive. And this is what this curriculum is supposed to do. It's supposed to change all that in order for the expectations of not just pupils and students within the educational system, but also teachers to have higher expectations of their so-called peers or colleagues or friends from amongst other so-called ethnic groups. And this is what I believe, that this educational system should propel the next generation to be more culturally competent than what they are now. They're the most culturally incompetent people, and they are setting up their pupils and students to fail in the so-called global village because they only see their so-called small vicinity as the world. It's far much beyond that, because in a multicultural, because in a globalization, and this is what we sociologists call this, we now living in a globalization, okay? And we are so closer together, even if we're thousands of miles away, that we could communicate, you know, and we can interact with one another. And this is how things are really, really going to change for the future. But sorry for talking for so long, but I just wanted to
That's okay. I think it's enough that people, their minds should be churning for everyone inside of here, so then you can start thinking of what do we inject? Like how do we inject whatever initiatives, whatever ideas, how do we actually inject into everything that you just said there? Because it's very important to be viewing our curriculum as a whole, in a holistic way, so then we can start strategically, at the same time more proactively injecting everything that we need to inject inside of it. And for you, Andrew, what from yourself, in terms of your generation, you growing up and you going through that kind of that journey through the curriculum and through education, what do you feel was lacking, and what do you feel is important now that we do put some attention towards, and it's echoing exactly what Abu-Bakr just said as well?
I think in schools there's still an over-reliance on like individuals. So you'll hear people who have stories about individual teachers that believed in them. And a lot of the time that was my experience. I had certain teachers who obviously saw a potential in me that regardless of what my behavioral issues were, I was still like academically strong. And they kind of made me understand and hone my kind of curiosity. But at the same time, like school, like I say this all the time, for me, schools have evolved the least in society out of every other kind of facet of our society. School and the current iteration of society we're in now is misaligned. There's not a congruence there. Schools are still playing catch up, and the way things are taught, the things they decide to teach, are still so far back, and they're not understanding, as Abu-Bakr said, we're moving way into a completely different way of life, way of thinking. And I think schools and teachers maybe are not fully equipped to deal with how rapid these changes are. And I think, getting new things into the curriculum is crazy that for me that it's taken this long, you know what I'm saying? Because in terms of black education, it's minimal. Minimal, if it's like everyone said, it's Of Mice and Men, To Kill a Mockingbird, and slavery. That was the extent of the black education that we had. And it's all things to kind of disempower people of color, because you don't learn anything that's empowering. You don't learn about role models. You don't learn about black people who have done X, Y, and Z. You learn about our subversion. You learn about our oppression. Things that if you leave with only that in mind, you're not gonna feel that sense of empowerment as a black individual. It's that kind of victimhood is perpetuated as making black people seem like they're victims, and of course we have been and are still currently in other ways, but it's a very two-dimensional and reductive way to look at the black experience. There's far more in the black experience that I think is more worthwhile. And I think if not for the fact that I was just genuinely curious as an individual, and the fact that I had in my family structure a mother that pushed me and pushed me and pushed me and kind of gave me alternate information and knowledge, and I then pursued that knowledge myself, I probably, it would have messed me up, I think, just from my experience in school, because I always felt like teachers just didn't understand. Like, if I wasn't stimulated in class, it's not because of me, it's because this is not engaging, you know what I'm saying? Like, I always had a problem with engagement, and that's why, eventually I was able, they let me listen to music in lessons or stuff like that, because that was just a way to keep me present and keep me in the moment, because I found like 90% of the things that we were studying to just be really completely irrelevant. Like, just completely not relevant to my life, to my experience, and to where I thought life was going for me. So I really struggled at times to reconcile my own personal kind of taste and curiosity with what was being fed to me in school. And that's why I went down. Obviously, I studied English literature in uni. I love literature because I guess that was a way where the onus was kind of put more on the individual, because it was based on your own analysis, your own interpretation, and that's the kind of things that I gravitated towards, because it enables the individual perspective to come out to play. But other subjects, I couldn't take to it, man. I just couldn't take to it. So I think a lot needs to change. I think schools need to understand that they need to move away from this dichotomy where the teacher is the infallible person in the classroom and the person that holds all the knowledge. Because there was times I genuinely thought, and not even in an arrogant way, that I actually, in specific contexts or specific things we were learning, I felt like I actually had more knowledge than the teacher. But it would come across as arrogant. I get kicked out of the class, or Andrew thinks he knows it, or like I'm not paying attention. My teacher will try and catch me out, and I'll answer the question perfectly, and they think, oh, okay, kick him out, he's being arrogant. But it's like, it's not arrogant. It's arrogant to assume that you hold the most knowledge in the room. Like, it needs to move to a more kind of collective, horizontal structure where we are all learning together, and we can, we did Connevin, and being in the class with some of those kids, I would just sit down and listen, and I was learning so much from them. And I was able to kind of relinquish any thought I had of being the authoritative figure in the room, to just let the kids be like, they be telling me stuff. I'm like, whoa. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you're feeding them, then they can see, and that has a positive impact on the child, to see I'm really attentively listening. I'm engaged in what this child is telling me, because this is an intelligent child. This child knows what they're talking about. It's very pedantic sometimes in classrooms. It's very patronized. Like, teachers can be really patronizing, And I try in any kind of learning environment to really remove myself from that sense of being the person that holds the most knowledge, and not try and be patronizing, because that's when you really get that kind of shared learning experience. So for me, it's about changing the kind of formulation and the structures of education, in the sense of that classroom context, in terms of us being like, okay, here's a topic at hand, what we say, rather than me as a teacher coming and being like, this is that. Like, information in schools is very much seen as they taught it in a way that this is correct and this is incorrect. Yes. But how often in life are things plainly correct or incorrect? All the nuances removed, you know what I'm saying? And I think does more harm than good. Yeah, it's very detrimental, and it's not really the correct way to learn, in my opinion. So I think teachers need to be equipped with more and feel more secure in themselves, to just kind of take a step back sometimes and allow that learning process to happen organically. But I also think there needs to be like just a serious reconfiguration of what education even is now in this century, in the way, as Abu-Bakr said, with the technological advancements where we are as a society, just information and knowledge and that process has to be revised, I think, collectively.
With that kind of reconsideration and reconstruction, what I hear from you, which I think is going to be with everyone inside of this room, is that the community element in terms of the external. So much school being internal, if I use that as a term, and then the external in terms of what else is coming out of the school. You of course had your family, you had your mother that was giving you these resources in order to kind of elevate you in ways that you were able to be kind of knowledgeable in certain things that you were able to recognize. Whatever you're putting in front of me in terms of the teacher, whatever you're putting in front of me, I'm not interested. And that has happened, I know that happened to myself in terms of what I was interested in and what I wasn't interested in when I came into school. That luckily, because I was so drawn to creativity, growing up in and around creation and around art, I was able to kind of gather and start weaving my way into that that kind of pathway. It's so vital that we do, which I want to get from all of you on the panel as well, is we really look at education as the whole, not just within schools. Yeah. Because the school is one step, as well as you going home, I went home, everyone goes home. As soon as you step outside the school, as soon as you step outside the front door as well, it's who you're interacting with. All of that is very important, and that goes alongside everything that Andrew just said in terms of what structure that we had in place, where we were looking at school as the top. Everything's coming from the education system, everything and how we move is coming from that system. For Cynefin that you mentioned, Naz, I want you to kind of come in on Cynefin and what that was about and how that was connected. One, to obviously the school and the education system, and how it was also connected with the community, and how it was connected with kind of our upbringing, how it was connected to being that horizontal. You just said being a horizontal when we're dealing with the younger generation, when we're dealing with kind of that system too in terms of the school. So if you can kind of go in depth in terms of what connection Cynefin was.
So I worked as a kind of lead artist on that, and almost at the role of agent. So that was with the Arts Council of Wales. Cynefin was looking at Black, Asian, minority ethnic kind of culture, history, and how to bring that creatively into school. Like the creative learning project I've done before, is all pupil-led. It's all kind of co-curated. I'm kind of part of the learning process of that as well. It's just fascinating of those things that come out of that. It becomes really addictive to kind of keep those things going and those conversations. But there's really magic moments that come out of that. So I met the group, I think they were year 4, and it was kind of coming out of lockdown time as well. So there was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement with just being able to do something different. I think they were really curious about my story and my heritage and culture and things. So that was quite interesting, and I could kind of bring in a different context to that from my background, kind of being kind of Iranian, Welsh, kind of Italian mix there, and just show a lot of my heritage and culture. And then, you know, the children themselves as well. It was almost a sense of they wanted to kind of bring things in or talk about things. I suppose from a sense of my upbringing, it's been about food, you know, so I've kind of been from Pill and Dufferin, moved from Cardiff there, and it's all been connected with food, with community, with learning from my friends and their families as well. So I think I've been quite lucky in that to kind of where I've been growing up. So the young people then, we looked at who they were, their understanding of the world, what identity was to them. They talked about kind of belonging. They knew the word Cynefin. But then it was things like we got onto conversations about identity, about, you know, do they see themselves as Welsh? And they really didn't. They kind of said, nope. So it just led into more interesting conversations. I went in with an idea because they'd come up with some ideas before I'd got there. Still really open, but to do with photography and other aspects. But it changed completely into so many rich aspects of things, which I brought in from the companies, other organisations and community, because there was a need there. You know, the first, I think, talk I did with them, it was hard to articulate because there was so much happened in such a short time. They were all, you know, we did kind of giant portraits and things, we were doing group work, and they all just started writing these beautiful quotes, and they were, you know, it was just words were everywhere. And I was quite surprised, because I thought it'd be more drawing or aspects or shapes and pattern. But they were just really fascinated with words and with, you know, with quotes especially. So I thought, you know, spoken word is going to come into this. And I just used to each time put a few things on the table for them to kind of look at. So there was poetry books, and so we just started conversations. So it just led from that. So we did a kind of photo marathon. We looked at how we can kind of explore the world that way, how we can look at unity. The children themselves kind of chose words and things that meant something to them. But I think what I encouraged was, you know, open questioning, to be able to question things, to be able to wonder about the world or ask things that maybe you're worried about. So we created a kind of safe space there. The children focused a lot on anti-racism as well, and about activism, about, you know, they can make change, they can question things, they can look at the world. So Andrew came in as a guest and worked with us to do some spoken word. Also, we created our own BLM protest, and we did that throughout the school. So we kind of marched through the school. It was just an amazing atmosphere with that. And even some community, you know, some of the families came out across the community, and were kind of getting involved. We couldn't bring in the families in the way we wanted to, unfortunately, because of restrictions. But I think that was where I could bring in the richness from outside. So I worked with East. So we had Fatia come in and talk about her heritage and her culture, look at different aspects of the world and what, you know, the children could question things as well about her culture. You know, and children sat forward and you know, one said, oh, you're like me, you know. Oh, I'm the same culture as you, or I'm the same religion. And it just started more conversations. And I think there was just a really lovely trust that was built up from that was really important. Then I worked with Nyla and we worked with G Expressions and brought in movement, because actually we used to do a lot of creative aspects and then we'd go outside and move. I think even with Andrew, we was playing basketball. It was a lot about movement, about being outside, but it was bringing in the cultural aspect for that, for them to understand different music, different aspects, and actually look at emotion, look at, you know, the feelings behind those things and the reasoning behind those and the history. So, you know, there was aspects in a really short time, but they really made a difference. You know, it made the children think about, you know, how they are, how they ask questions, how they deal with other people. You know, we did textual aspects. We did kind of a kind of tree of unity. So we did kind of pom-poms of diversity, and the children wrote kind of beautiful quotes and visions on there for the world and things they were maybe dealing with now. And we created kind of jars with the same thing, with wishes, with hopes for the future, with maybe elements they're dealing with or looking at the world now. So it was as broad as we could do it within the time. And, you know, we created journey books as well. So the children could put in there things about their history, their heritage, and look at where we are now. And then it was looking at, you know, how do we broaden this? They were all really fascinated with books, with poetry, so it was looking at broadening what was in the library and thinking, you know, what should be in that library. So we formed a suitcase, just like a travelling bookshop, which the children could... I love suitcases from my granddad, so always I've got some really vintage ones, which they were always fascinated by. So it was just, you know, a kind of travelling library there of kind of culture, of ideas, of, you know, beautiful poets from around the world that the children could kind of be a part of as well. But I think with Cynefin, what was really important is it was sharing with the other artists that were part of it as well. So I met people and artists from all different cultures that I would never met before. And so I was learning along with them. But I think the children just brought so much richness to that and actually were so open to learn, and actually there was no judgment there. It was amazing. And actually their concern was more, you know, how do we go home and explain these things? You know, how do we have those conversations about being anti-racist, or, you know, how do we bring those up to our grandparents? So I think they were really keen about being able to be an activist. You know, I think especially with Andrew, with Nyla, with the people coming in from outside and really inspiring them to think differently, or them seeing it and thinking, I could do that, you know. It was just music, it was dance, it was arts, and I think
to be able to kind of give you a lot of information about yourself and about you, who was before you.
Yeah, sorry, and we
No
worked,
problem.
it's because we worked with you. I'm staring at you, that's why, so I'm looking at you. So, you know, and actually, so we brought in Anisma, we brought in yourself, and, you know, with the young people to direct their own film, which was amazing. You know, there was 2 young boys there, they were always observers, you know, one had my camera, they'd always take part, but it's like, you can do, you know, you can take part however you want to, but all of a sudden, they took charge, so they, you know, one's like, I'm the director, the other one is telling me off where I'm sat to kind of, for the, you know, the colours behind, and making sure we're all mic'd up correctly, and then we just did this beautiful piece, which was, you know, through the kind of wooded area, just all their poetry. I think Andrew and myself had a few hours to kind of with all their poems, and the children chose a few lines out of all of them, and we connected all their work together, and it just became this beautiful poem, the Moonstone poem they called it. So, and that was all filmed and directed, and the young people were a massive part of that.
And I'm seeing how we incorporate that into when we're looking at our communities and when we're looking at the younger generation. I'm seeing how many pathways and how many kind of alleys we're able to go through and present that open space. Because for education, one of the way I look at education, especially knowledge, is it being open and it being kind of it being very, very safe for you to be able to be vulnerable. As soon as you're vulnerable, then you allow access of that information, of the knowledge to come in. And reshaping it as well. What I could hear from you, Andrew, and from you, Naz, was how it's quite important for us to be shaping, not having our education, not having kind of our history and our knowledge being one-dimensional, not having it in a box, not having it inside of a cup and that's it. You can't explore out of the cup, you can't grow it, you can't change it or you can't move it, and that's why I feel like it's very, very important from what you both just said, that we do allow whoever's acquiring that knowledge to also be part of kind of shaping it, part of including how they want to learn, how they feel comfortable, so then you don't end up being an Andrew and myself being sat in a room just like, why am I here? Like, really truly, I could be at home writing something, I could be creating, and especially as growing up as a creative, and which I want to speak to start with yourself, Sienna, as well. Growing up as a creative, my mind is always, I'm always gaining ideas at every given moment. Obviously, you have your periods in time where it's a bit quiet, but you want to channel that, and by being able to channel it, you're able, again, being given access to more knowledge. And when we incorporate everything Abu-Bakr just said in terms of where the real reasons of certain things come from, then we're able to start reshaping it, and then we're able to kind of start elevating ourselves. For you being a creative, what have you found that kind of elevated you through the system, in terms of the education system, regardless of the school or the community, or even kind of as charities in terms of the inner circle? What have you gained that has kind of elevated you, and what have you not? What have you seen that didn't kind of do anything for you?
Wow, it's been really interesting, first of all, to hear everyone on the panel, your different perspectives. Andy, yourself, and being a teacher, Abu-Bakr, understanding what pupils or, you know, young people may go through, and Andrew also being one of those people, and myself as well, obviously, still in education. I've had quite I'd say I've had quite a unique experience when it comes to, you know, how education went and how teaching Black history within my education went. As for when I didn't go to an English-speaking education, I went to a Welsh-speaking education. My mum had agreed when I was really young, she didn't want me to go to Welsh education, and my auntie was insisting on her to send me to one, so she was like, okay. I'd say from my primary school, I did have a really good experience within education, but yeah, again, I was one of the only coloured people in my class. Leading up to high school then, I was one of the only coloured people in my year. So, I never felt as though I was, you know, different from anyone else, but obviously there are going to be moments where you're like, actually, there's a lot of people in this room right now, don't mean to sound rude, but like there's a lot of people in this room right now who aren't educated, and that led to me having some difficulties with, you know, how my education went within school. So, one, the teaching Black history within that. Two, not being able to express my creative side because there was a stereotype within Welsh education. For example, learning about Black history and, you know, learning about different ethnic education and stuff, like, I didn't really get a lot of that. I got all of that from my family, just like Andrew mentioned as well. Within school, it kind of got, I can't explain this, it kind of got just like pushed down in a way. And I understand now that it was a lot different from in English education as well, because majority of the Welsh education, they were not experienced or educated on Black history, because nowadays, well, not even nowadays, but just like, it was never really seen as a normal thing for ethnic cultures and people of colour to be speaking Welsh. So that was like a big thing as well for me. Coming into Urban Circle and being a person of colour, but also being able to bring in my Welsh into that, that's been an important experience for me, because a lot of people don't expect it when they first meet me. They don't assume it, they wonder how. They ask a million questions as to how I got that education. You know, why did I choose that education? Why didn't I choose the English path? Why am I speaking Welsh? What does it mean to me? What's the point if I'm coloured, you know? And there's just a lot of other elements within that. But from my creative side, I feel like I've developed the most as an individual in my own space, because I'm quite an independent person anyway, but I feel like I have developed more within like things outside of education school-wise. And it's not just about learning within school, it's not just about the education side of thing and the teaching side of thing. It's also about educating each other as people. It's not just about the learning side of it, the school side of it, the history side of it. It's about learning as people. It's about educating yourself first before you want to come and educate someone else, because it can come across as disrespectful, it can come across as, you know, hurtful to some people, because it got to the point where I was uncomfortable in the education I was in, that I decided to leave and go and finish my last few years of school in an English curriculum, in an English school, because I felt as though I was mistreated. I felt as though I wasn't respected the same as all of my other peers who weren't of colour, if that makes sense. But yeah, I ended up spending my last few years of education in an English school, because I felt more comfortable there. One, because I was surrounded by more people of colour. Two, a lot more people were educated, and I didn't feel as though I was being separate in that sense. But it's like Andrew mentioned as well about the education side of thing and what we learn. We don't get empowered in our education when it comes to Black history. You know, it's fine for teachers to talk about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and they'll talk about the positive side of things, but before the end of that session, it's always about all the negative they did afterwards. Gandhi, all the negative he did.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King, oh yeah, he did this, he achieved this, but he did all of this wrong. Same with Malcolm X, he did this, but he also did this wrong. There was never one day, one lesson I could walk out of that class feeling empowered, not just, you know, within what they were teaching, but also the way they were coming across with it. And that's also been another tricky thing for me anyway, because I felt at times I didn't know where I fitted in, what category I fitted in. You know, my mum, she's Pakistani, and my dad, he's Caribbean, so I've got both sides of, you know, the family and the food. So, yeah, best thing ever. But yeah, you know, there have been times where I've, you know, not felt like I didn't know what path to take, and that's when I started to become, you know, more on the creative side. I started to write music. I mean, I've always had a passion for music anyway, but I knew that if I wanted to expand within that, and I knew if I wanted to create something within that, I needed to be surrounded by people who were, you know, willing to be on the same path as me, but also people that would uplift me, and people who were educated in that sense. And I think that's so important. That's what Urban Circle has allowed me to do, especially. They've allowed me to grow, but also give me enough space and enough, you know, area for me to go and do that by myself, which is so important to me. So I think overall, with like my music and stuff, it is still on the developing side, but I know as long as I'm surrounded by people who, you know, they understand me and they're willing for change, and like, you know, you need to be surrounded by people, well, in other short words, you need to be surrounded by people who are willing to uplift you, not bring you down. And I feel like me moving school and me, you know, taking a different path showed me that there is going to be people in your life that you come across that will understand you. They will respect you, and they will, you know, educate you in a way that allows you to learn more, not to lose more, if that makes sense. You know, because I was one of them kids. I was very similar, you know, to Andrew. Like I do have a very short attention span. If I'm not engaged, if I'm not interested in something, I'm gone. I'm sorry, I can't sit there, you know. Like it's just, do you know what I mean? And I think I'm the type of person as well, when a certain subject gets talked about or a certain subject gets brought up and I'm interested in it, I will sit here and I will talk for hours and hours and hours on it. And that's purely on people letting me have that freedom to be able to do it, not people sat in front of me saying this is correct, this is what you can say and this is what you can't say. It's just giving you that free room and it's giving you that free space, because when you're passionate about something and when you keep talking about something, everyone else in the room disappears and you're just, you know, creating something within yourself and you keep going and you can't stop, and then before you know it, everyone's like, okay, you've been talking too much now. Yeah, I think overall, just to finish off now because I'm talking too much, I just think overall it's really important that, like I said, my one main sentence is, you know, educate yourself before you educate others, because you don't know the impact, you don't know the, you know, you don't know like what problems or, you know, what negative feel you might have on other people that you're trying to, you know, teach and stuff. So I think it's important that you give people enough space to, you know, do what they want to do, but also educate in a way that is respectful to them, because that's what a lot of people don't talk about, is respect, and people's feelings and people's, you know, attitudes towards things get dismissed, especially young people. You know, our voices get dismissed, and I think it's so important that, you know, we're all given a voice individually and uniquely, because we are the future, you know. Don't mean to sound all big-headed or whatever, but, you know, we are the future, so it's important that we're all given a fair chance, I'd say, within education.
Happy to, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Happy to hear you say that word respect, because that's vital when it comes into anyone sharing a piece of information, how you put it across if you're coming from a pure heart, which that's what I could hear was lacking from the Welsh school as you went through, and from your journey, a lot of that level of respect and pure heart and that intention to actually excel you and empower you. When we're speaking of young people and we're talking of pillars, empowerment is vital in that. There's 5 pillars, as we know. You've got to empower them, you have to include them in those decisions that you're making. You have to include them. You have to allow them to take participation. You have to allow them to want to be participant. You don't have to force whatever it may be into them. And that inclusion too, as we know, you end up being excluded if you don't feel engaged in something. You will exclude yourself, and then on top of it, you get excluded by whoever's overseeing or whoever's teaching you. So you're already a losing battle there at the same amount of time.
Double whammy.
Double whammy indeed.
Yeah.
So what I could hear from you, Sienna, is one, you had the strength and you had the know-how and your identity to be able to say, you know what, now it's time for me to dip. Now it's time for me to go elsewhere so I can kind of strengthen myself. I don't need to associate myself in that anymore at the same amount of time, and I can recognise that something's incorrect here. And then on top of it too, role models, I could hear where it was lacking levels of role models who to look up to. Because teachers, as growing up, we look up to teachers. It's put in that way, so we look up to teachers, we look up to anyone that's older inside of your community. So yourself, Nyla, I deem you as a massive role model, because obviously of your pathway and what you've been able to achieve. How have you been able to carry on the work that you do while still kind of stay grounded at the same amount of time, and to recognise what's missing and still inject and still insert what needs to be done? How have you been able to kind of do so, and how do you think we should proceed to do so as well?
Just like a lot of what people have been saying around the table, really, is that support, you know, mechanism. And mine's been family, as well as the organisation I'm involved in, as well as, you know, my own upbringing, life experiences. They've all had such a big impact on who I've shaped myself to be, and who I am now, and the work that I do. And obviously we are a lot of creatives around the table. So if a creative artist, just working with young people and seeing the things that they're being taught inside a school, or maybe just within their communities, or those that are not being taught anything because they don't live in those communities. Unfortunately, there is a lot of communities around Wales that don't have people of colour, that don't have that education of ethnic minorities. Myself being mixed race, I sometimes feel quite torn in my life and in the relationships that I have, because it's almost like I have to defend both sides, you know, and just sat around the table now with all of us, sometimes I feel like, am I black or am I white? And I know that sounds silly, you know, especially now as I'm in my 30s, I should know who I am. And I do know who I am, and I value both of my families very much. But there's a lot of people that don't. And I'm still having now to educate my children on who they are as mixed heritage children, you know, because they don't get that in school, unfortunately. Growing up, I didn't have anyone of colour teaching me. And I worked in education previously for 5 years, and there was myself and another black teacher that was in the school. And we were one of the biggest schools in Newport. And unfortunately, it does depend on the person, you know. Why is there not teachers of colour? Why are there not enough black teachers in school? Because for myself, am I going to listen to a person who has no knowledge of black people or no black people around them who are telling me about being black? I'm not going to, right? I'm not going to, unfortunately. But then Andy really inspired me just now, telling his story. He used his own initiative to go away and think about what young people need to listen to. Think about, okay, well, black culture is a big thing right now. Music is a big thing. Young people learn and express themselves through the arts. So what have I got to do to be able to bring this into the curriculum? Because it's not just the history teacher having to teach about black history. It's everything, like we've just said, it's the whole curriculum. So how can I uplift the children within music? How can I help them to tell their own stories and be on their own pathways, their own journeys? Do we have enough teachers like Andy? I don't even know. I've never met someone who's thought about going away and thinking, right, how can I help these children that I'm working with? When you're within a school setting, you're within education, or even myself as a youth worker, when I walk into a session, I look around the room and I see who I'm working with. Sometimes I'm like, okay, this is a very inclusive group. We might have children from all different settings. How do I engage all of them? Because all of them are not going to have the same skills, the same education. So what is their needs? How do I think about that? Now, it can be difficult within a school, a college, a primary school. That teacher going in has to stick to a certain curriculum, and this is why the curriculum needs to change. Can we adapt? Can the schools adapt depending on their classroom? Is it, okay, year 9 are learning this? Well, no, this year 9 class, actually, they need to learn something else because this group of year 9 children are not where this group is. Can they adapt then? I don't know if that's actually happening in schools. I can't say. Maybe Andy can talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, it's more so, to answer your question, I'm sorry, I just kind of gone off on a tangent a little bit. But it's more so the people around me, my life experiences, being able to go away and think about how can I help and assist and support the next generation. And again, speaking off of my journey, this is why I wrote a short film to raise awareness about being of mixed heritage, because there is a lot of young people out there that they might be of mixed heritage, but they only know one. They only know one culture, they only know one religion, and they don't understand the others because they might not be in a home where there's both mother and father. It might just be a mother, it might just be a father, you know, and they might not be able to have that knowledge because they don't have that family around them. So where else are they going to get it from? Because I assure you, I don't think it's happening in schools. And I know my children are in school more than they're with me when it's term time. So what needs to change, and how can we make that change? I know that's what we're here to talk about, but that's my input. So there you go.
No, well said. Where I'm seeing the change from yourself is that community work that ends up being inserted, how vital it is. So then it gives you it gives you a sense of idea to go ahead and start questioning more. And that it's okay to question. I think you said it, Naz, as well, how these young people were questioning, and it was refreshing because, and I think you recognise it as well, Andrew, that the questions that they were presenting, it's like, oh, okay, I'm happy for you to question that, but they were comfortable enough, they were safe enough to ask those questions. And within our educational structure, sometimes we don't feel safe enough. We don't present a position for whoever's being taught to feel safe enough to ask a certain question. Where do you feel, Zanaya? Where do you feel? Where do you feel that you've been able to gain kind of empowerment in terms of things that made you feel good, things that's made you want to know more? When it comes to your culture as well, where do you feel that's come from, whether it's community or whether it's school, anywhere else?
It's come a lot from like my family and learning like from them, because in school, like as everyone else has said, it's like I don't hear a lot about it. Like we had like a Black History Month, I think it was like in October, and we had like Welsh back, and we had to like learn about that. But we only had like one slideshow, and we had to like name like Black people who like can think of the word, inspire you. And like, well, I was naming some, and some of my teachers didn't even know like who Martin Luther King was. Like, it was like,
Jesus Christ.
like if I know who it is and you don't know who it is, then it's a bit like. So I just thought that was a bit weird, and we don't learn a lot about like Black History Month, and because what we learn about is just slavery, and we're just in history. There was just wasn't. I felt like it's just Black history just about slavery. Like you don't learn a lot about it. Like it doesn't empower you or make you feel like proud to be Black, because you just think you're just supposed to just slavery. And obviously I go to John Frost, and there is like diversity in the school, but like when you're in that classroom, it's just only you. And when the teachers are teaching about like people being Black or the slavery, it just makes you feel, it doesn't make you feel good in school. And I don't think I learned a lot from school. So I just learned about my culture from my family or like from different people, but outside of school. I don't think our school has that good education about Black people at all.
And when we were talking earlier, you said that, you know, when you were doing Black History Month, you were one of the only Black people in your class. And when the teacher started talking, everyone just looked at you.
I think that's a shared experience. That certainly happened to us in the 70s. As soon as I mention anything Black,
the worst one is when the teacher starts reading Mice of Men, and then everyone decides to look at you, and then she hesitates before she can say something, and it's like, well, no, if you feel comfortable enough to say that, then say that. But you know, why is everyone looking at me? Like, do you want me to take the book and come and say it for you, or do you need someone else of colour to come and you know, read this specific sentence for you to feel okay, or is it just me? Because I've been in situations. I went to for college, for example. It took me a really long time to decide what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to do my A-levels or a BTEC course. A-levels or a BTEC course. I just went back and forth. So I thought I'd give both a try. So I started with a music BTEC. I just thought, you know what, this might be a really good experience for me to express myself, to you know, show my creative side, you know, to write all these music and, you know, play all these instruments. And, you know, first of all, the second I got in the classroom, there was no one of colour in that classroom. I was the only person of colour in that classroom. So I didn't really take anything of that. I just thought, okay, that's fine. You know, I'm just going to keep doing what I do, try and make some friends. You know, I don't know anyone in this class. Like, I didn't go to Nash or to Cross Keys. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go do something else. And I decided to go to Cardiff College because I wanted a fresh start for myself. So I didn't stay in Newport or within the Gwent area. So I went into my class, and the teacher started explaining the curriculum and what we were doing within that month. So she said how we're going to start off with the blues, then we're going to go on to jazz, and then we're going to go on to classical. So very similar to what Andy had mentioned about the, you know, the stereotypical structure. But there was an opportunity for us all to express ourselves as our like introduction, and we were all set like songs. And one of the songs that I recommended for my group was "Killing Me Softly" by the Fugees, because it was one on the list. And my teacher, she's come up to me and she said, "I think it's best if you choose a different song to something better that will suit our curriculum." And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not even gonna, you know, I'm not even gonna expand on that now. I'm just gonna, you know, I think I'm in a new class with new people. I'm just gonna let it go and just pick something else. And then I'd explained how, you know, I wanted to go on to the songwriting area, because you could go on production or you can go on to the songwriting area. So I obviously wanted to go on to the songwriting area of things. And then we spoke about different genres, and we all got to pick our own genre, as in what songs we wanted to write. So majority of the class were picking rock, or they were picking alternative or like indie. And I said, you know what, I'm not really on that side of music, you know, I think I'm going to pick something else that suits me. So I said, I'm going to pick R&B, I'm going to pick rhythm and blues. Like, that's where my strongest point is. That's the music I love, that's the music I listen to. I'm open to learning other things, I'm open to learning and listening to other things, but it's just how that gets brought in. So I'd explain to my tutor, I was like, okay, I want to do R&B. And she was like, oh, we don't do that around here. She was like, sorry, but we're not going to be able to facilitate you in that genre. You know, if you want to go do that type of music, you have to do it elsewhere.
You should have come to Lamon High School.
But yeah, so I should have said, well, go speak to Andy then. You know what I mean? Let him teach you some music. But she said, you know, we can't facilitate you if you want to do that type of music.
How do we get to that place?
I don't know.
From here, where teachers are schooled in Martin Luther King and are schooled in R&B.
Yeah.
Are we ever going to get to that place?
Well, listening, you know, there's so many points going in that, and I've probably forgotten most of them, you know, and you're right. The problem, one of the problems is teachers, they stay where they're comfortable, you know, and so from that experience, probably the teacher's comfortable in those genres of music, and so kind of avoids that. So number one, yeah, we need to try and educate teachers in areas where they're not so comfortable.
Teachers, because from my impression, we've tried to communicate with teachers over these last 18 months regarding this change in the curriculum to say that we'll offer whatever support they want from a black perspective.
Okay.
And we've had zero response. Are they open to be re-educated?
Yeah, I can only talk from my school's experience, and that is a really good experience from what I've had. You know, my project was one of the first, and then from that, I did some workshops as well, and got things kind of moving. And again, I mentioned Sean Smith before. She's quite inspirational, to be honest, and she's really pushing at this. And the new curriculum does listen to what a lot of you are saying. The new curriculum does open this avenue. So you want cross-cutting themes, it's diversity. It's all about ethnically informed citizens, or ethical informed citizens. Sorry, not ethnically. So it's trying to create like well-rounded citizens, basically. You know. Now, if you're offering support, I have no idea why schools wouldn't have you, because if I have your number afterwards, I'll be getting you in, you know. But yeah, we're looking at our curriculums now, and we're saying where can we put things in which does this, which creates a well-rounded citizen coming out of our schools. So we are doing that, you know, we're looking at, because this, it allows us to do it instead of having a set national curriculum saying you need to learn this, and this. Now we're saying, this is our kind of end goal, what we want a pupil to look like, and you go ahead now and you start designing your curriculum around that. Okay. The danger is that some teachers, because I can't speak for everyone, and from some of the things that you said yourself, that was true to my education, but from my experience in my school isn't quite true, you know, especially from my teaching point of view. Every pupil is exactly saying to me, and actually I'm getting a drubbing if a pupil's not achieving, no matter what ethnicity they are. Do you know what I mean? I'm getting the questions asking why. And so, yeah, we latch on to any people who's shows any interest whatsoever, really. But I guess my point of view, a couple of things from that is, from what you've been saying, is yes, I think things are changing. Do we have the tools at the moment? At my school, we're getting them. You know, one of the tasks was recently we had an inset where we had to develop a new a unit of work within our curriculum that covered diversity. So again, I can only talk from a music point of view, but we decided to use Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Going to Come" as a very starting point. Now we can learn so many different musical skills from that, but also we can talk about, what's this song about, you know, where would you like to see changes within, and write lyrics within that. So it is easy for music.
Was that including someone of another background besides British or Welsh? In terms of creating that kind of the information pack, let's say.
As in to help us, or
yes, to help you, or in
no,
it
it was
process.
The process was we would go away within our areas to do that, and so go on.
Why would that be any different to any teacher trying to teach an African about them being African?
Sorry, say that again.
Why would that be any different from like myself trying to be taught how to be, that I am African if it's coming from someone that's English?
Yeah.
What is the difference here?
I guess you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? You know, and trying to put in that content. But from when I started looking at this, like new curriculum and whatnot, but the word that always came back in my head was authentic, and you know, and that's what the school is saying. It's got to be authentic, you know, and actually. If it's not authentic and if it's not to do with the learning, then actually kids pick up on it, you know. So number one, it has to be authentic. For it to be authentic, you need to know what you're on about, so you have to educate yourself, you know. You're right, but at the moment there's not many options, are there? You know, within my area, we're all white teachers. There aren't enough black teachers. There aren't. I don't know if that's because black people are sensible, to be honest. Because you know, but there aren't, you know, and especially in Wales there aren't. So something needs to be done about that. First of all, I don't know whether that is experience of education or what. But
it's not. I don't think it's an appealing career at this stage for black people, really. If your experience throughout the school has been a specific way, you're not going to want to jump into that context. So. I don't know where the change has to come to get more black teachers in.
But at the same time, if you're not in the room, then who's making that change, you know?
And also, like, would you want a black teacher to go into the structures in the way they currently are? That could cause more harm than good.
I think that's part.
There's always a balancing act.
That's part of the wider problem, is that in any industry, really, if there's no representation or not a lot of black faces, for you to be the first one to go in there,
that's what's happening.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage and strength to be that first person, and a lot of people, the flack that's going to come with that, a lot of people don't want to set themselves up for it. You go into a school now, you're the only black teacher. What does the staff room look like when you're heating up your fish?
You're jollof, right?
That's not.
Where we hold more strength now is we can be more unapologetic about it than before.
Well, we can have the discussion now.
We
can talk about it at least.
One, the so-called we have the arsenal, and two, we have the backing of our own communities in some aspect of things. So, and then what I was about to ask for yourself, Andrew, and for you, Abu-Bakr, as well, is about how we reshape the word teacher, because I don't look at a teacher as just being the teacher that's from school. I look at every single person on this panel, on these tables now, as a teacher. But us as black, as Asian, whatever it may be, how do we reshape that word teacher so then we can go in these positions and say, I am a teacher without needing to be in a school system. And at the same way, we know the system was set up in a certain type of way at the same time.
Yeah, there's something with education and socialization, and I do this on a lot of my lecture circuits of trying to not just identify, but to amplify the reality that we're all teachers. And I usually give an example about a mother that's teaching her baby. She didn't have a teaching qualification in order to do that, to get those sensory motor skills activated to its surroundings. So I think that the responsibility has to start from home. It's a responsibility of the community as well as the neighborhood. And the thing about it is that the school is just a part of that experience. Yeah, you know, the unfortunate reality in some cases is that we rely too much on the educational system to do what we should be doing and we're not doing. And then we want to blame the educational system. No, it's our, you know, if we're bringing children into this world or adopting children or fostering them or whatever the case may be, it's our job to socialize them adequately with enough knowledge and information in order for them to navigate themselves in this hostile society so they can come out the other end unscathed in some way, because that is the reality. And it's about life skills as well, you know, because for me as an educator, I've worked in education since for 30 years. I've applied for over 300 jobs. I have 5 teaching qualifications. I'm also a child psychologist. Can get a full-time job. There's a colour bar in the Welsh educational system, and I have said that to the Welsh government. When I was on the working group, one of the things that we looked at was not the decolonisation of the curriculum or the syllabus, but the decolonisation of the institution, the working staff. Okay, that's what needs to be done. There's over 35,000 teachers registered, yeah, and less than 2,000 are coming from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups. And recorded is only less than 70 who identify as Black. And do you know the majority of them in supportive roles? They have full teaching qualifications and they have to be support workers in the class. That is the reality in Wales as far as the educational system is concerned. And they need to be called out on this, that there is a colour bar in the educational system. And I've known Asian teachers who've worked 20, 30 years, you know, they're good at what they do, they care, they can engage, as an example, with the pupils, and they're never looked upon to be in senior roles. That is the reality. And the educational system needs to be called out about this. The other thing which I want to emphasize as well is that, you know, with the new curriculum coming together, it's a responsibility of everyone, you know, because what has happened is that the government has given a level of agency to the teachers to put in, you know, it's given them the guidelines, the framework, and they can work within that. So there's an element of agency, a bit of freedom, flexibility, you know, for them to go out and to collect this content and collect the material and to deliver it, you know, obviously to their pupils. But the thing as well is that households now need to take ownership of this. Okay, this is what is really important. This is a time for families and communities to take ownership of this curriculum and to make sure that their narrative is steered in a direction that is going to empower their children and the next generation as far as the 22nd century is concerned, because the Welsh government has put this proposal forward that it wants to create an anti-racist Wales by 2030. What is it going to do to knock down the decolonisation with all the different forms of institutions within this country, where there's education, economics, entertainment, labour law, politics, religion, as far as sex and war is concerned? These are the human activities which we all engage in. And if decolonisation is looking at this particular sector, this particular institution, but we leave these alone, it's not going to happen. And the first thing that the Welsh Assembly government, and I said this to them, is decolonisation in the Senate. We can't have 2 people of colour, and you feel fine with that. We've done our bit for diversity and equity and equality. It needs to be wider. But educational system, I think it's one of those important factors, because our pupils are in the educational system for, you know, an average of 60 years. Some go on to further education, higher education, you know, but it is a form of training. Even if you look at the primary stage and the secondary stage, it is a form of training. It's not necessarily education. And we know this because the same educational system they transported to Africa and Asia when they were colonial administrators is exactly the same education they have today. It's a form of training the minds to think in a particular direction and for them to propel themselves into what advantages and what sort of access they can gain within their surroundings or the society they see themselves in. And we have to ensure that the educational system is able to give those pupils who are so-called disadvantaged, polarized, or marginalized, that belief that no matter how hostile the environment is, there has been some major changes in order to allow them access into those particular sectors, especially in the corporate world and the private sector. We don't want to stay, many of us do not want to stay in the public sector. We want to move into other elements where we don't see our face in decision-making decisions, such as CEOs, senior management, middle management, whatever the case may be. This thing is as wide as we can think of. Sorry for going on.
Why does everyone keep apologising?
Can I just say, I left
Yes,
that music
please,
course,
yes,
by the
please.
way. Yeah, I left it. I never stayed. I did something else.
But that understanding of how vastly wide it is vital. I think it's so important. And then also, I think what's important even about this now is the research. As much as we have been in the research phase for a period of time, it's the research that we're going to focus on now. And what you said, Abu-Bakr, about the families and the communities having the resources that are needed. I wish I had a cup as well. We
not
be
much
okay to
left.
share a
Yeah,
cup?
yeah,
Yeah,
come
we
on,
share a
of
cup.
course,
Yeah,
of
let's
course.
get the juice over here.
Couple dribbles there.
Oh, we can share this little bit as well. See, and it's things like this as well. Metaphorically speaking, and quite direct about how we share as communities and as families. It's important for us to be able to share what we know and what we have. And by being able to do so, then we're able to excel each other as a whole. Then, go ahead.
Yeah, just to jump in there, one of the other elements of the new curriculum is collaboration and collaborating with people outside of school. So not just teachers teaching, like you say.
Yeah.
That's great, but to do that, you need the funding to do that, and you need to pay people to come in to do that. So at this stage where we're writing a new curriculum, wouldn't it be fantastic where there was a certain amount of people that could come and help with that, you know, could help with you know, a black history or whatnot, you know, that would really be helpful. So we're not just searching out random collaborators, you know, which is what's happening at the moment. With the Welsh government, really, to do this properly, probably need to provide us with people
With
like
urban
people like yourself who can help with that and say, well, that's, you're going in the right direction, you know, you've completely gone the wrong one there. Because otherwise, you know, we are, like I said, educating ourselves at the moment, and we kind of need that collaboration in the design stage, not just, and I do think this is essential as well, when we are delivering new curriculum, is having people come in, speaking to the pupils, people that look like them, that they can aspire to be like, I think is really important. And the moment we do, we are trying to incorporate that as well, and when we give examples, and not just in music, but within, you know, maths and science, to give examples of people who want to get a nice diverse range of people, not just the white people who've done, you know, well in science or maths. So we are trying to do that, but having someone, I know when Cynefin project was on, having Joe Roberts in, who's mixed heritage as well, coming in, and it's just, you know, some of the pupils just took to him straight away, you know, and it's fantastic to see, really. And I think there definitely needs to be that collaboration going on, but it needs to be something that hopefully Welsh Government can employ people to do that with us, and so we're not just kind of relying on the school to shell out funding, because funding's difficult at the moment in schools, you know, and perhaps those resources need to be there for us to help us in the design stage and in the delivery stage. That would be ideal, really. And it's not just creative. You know, academia needs to be diverse as well, doesn't it? You know, we want everybody. We want scientists. We want mathematicians. We need everything. And I think you pointed out it earlier. Yeah, generally it's music, isn't it? It's sport. You know, where you see black pupils kind of excel and again, there may be a variety of reasons for that, but we need people from all different ethnic backgrounds excelling in academia and in expressive art and sport as well. It needs to be a broad range, you know, and it needs to be, you can do what you want, do what you're good at, you know, and I think that's really important, and that's, hopefully, I see good things happening in this new curriculum. Hopefully it will be provided that, but I don't think we should forget that academia as well is essential.
No, so I'm glad you alluded towards in terms of the funding aspect of things, because that's a key kind of that's a key brick in the foundation of this house that we want to rebuild, even though it's been there. So you, Naz and Chris, you know about kind of the people that are doing the work, what needs to be done where the people who are doing the work are the ones that are getting funded, as opposed to whoever just applies for it. Oh, yeah, they may have a good idea, let's give it to them. what needs to be done, and especially taking the experience and the positions that you're both in, what needs to be done for that funding to go to the right places, so then everything that Andy just says then starts to be shaped and starts to be changed, and then it goes into us being that 2030 comes along, and it's, we get to have that terminology which the Welsh Government threw out there.
I think for me, thank you. Sorry, for me it'd be that lived experience is so important, and to bring in different cultures, different heritage within the project and the school. You know, a recent one is another kind of creative schools project with the Arts Council, but the children have decided that, you know, where are the stories in their library, where are the books they want to kind of create their own stories, look at their heritage, but actually look at the places that are missing, the history that's missing, and create that. So I've kind of connected artists from Cynefin. So there's Bevan, who's an amazing storyteller, and Prith, who's a beautiful illustrator that's been actually from the first part of Cynefin. She started creating her own books because she noticed there wasn't any link to her heritage and her culture. We were inspired by, you know, the children she worked with. So there is those dynamic teachers out there. You know, they're all really inspired. They all want to do something from the schools and classrooms that I've been within. But, you know, you're right, it's where it's coming from, it's how it's taught. And I think you were saying, you know, you've got to be educated yourself to be able to educate. And actually, as Andrew was saying, even to realise when maybe sometimes you're learning more from the people within the classroom, I think that's where it can be quite powerful as well. But I think teachers and schools, they need the resources. They do need the people coming from outside, from other agencies. You know, obviously you're all wonderful people here and from lots of different organisations and kind of beliefs. And I think there's a lot that connects us, kind of linked to that belonging, that identity, and wanting the representation and the respect to kind of be taught further. I definitely don't have all the answers. It's just a sense of Chris. It's just more, I think, it's being able for, you know, consultation to happen, for those sharing aspects to come together, and to be able to bring in a wider sense of community into it, because schools are quite insular, and I was a secondary teacher for 5 years, you know, a long time ago, and I think there was a sense of there was myself, and there was one other black teacher, and it was within, you know, I was brought up in a council estate. It was in a different council estate in Cumbraen, but my identity was questioned, my religion was questioned a lot by parents, and a lot of aspects within that first few weeks was, you know, shocking things that the young people would say, which just led me to kind of do almost like a presentation about my history and myself, and then more young people started coming to me and being like, oh, you know, I'm mixed race too, or, you know, so it just started these conversations kind of in lunchtime or after school. Because I did mind, you know, it was like, ask me any question you want. You know, my name, you know, my surname is Syed, so it was kind of linked to EastEnders. I think they were all looking at, you know, it was kind of where were they seeing the representation of myself outside was really funny, because it was maybe more Asian than what I felt that I was even, you know. And I think, and I'm kind of part of, so I'm from lots of different mixed culture, and I've got kind of Pakistani and Asian in my family as well. So you kind of see so many different sides there. That need to be represented and brought together. So I just think, it needs a lot more wider community input coming into it, and a lot more support for the teachers. I don't know where that funding comes from, but I think a lot of projects now are being so inclusive that you can kind of be within that and be quite clever with how you work forward. So I'll happily sit and chat, and I think, you know, linked to culture, you know, we're linked to what you do, Chris, as well. You must see a lot of it from the other side as well.
I've got a foot in both sort of areas, in the statutory, and in the public. For some of the council, you just get money certain times of the year. It's just being thrown around, bandied around willy-nilly. And in the voluntary sector, it's a constant battle. And I think what's going to happen from the funders, it's hard to tell them what to do with their money, but support what's working. You know, so what kills us in our sector is, well, we'll get short-term funding, and it normally is. The maximum funding you'll probably get is 3 years. And you'll have a successful project, but you know in the last year of that project, you've got to start winding it down. And then you've got to reinvent something else, because they don't like funding the same thing twice, so you've got to reinvent something else to replace what is working. And you're always in that sort of mind space of how am I going to make continue the same
It
project.
also involves them spending even more money. Because once you have something going, you know, more time, like, you don't need really that much funding because it's within you, it's something you're passionate about,
I mean, as an example, a pot of money got directed into Pill. God, it's got to be about 5 years now. And I think it was about £1 million to be divided up amongst projects in Pill. I remember saying to the girl right at the very start, if I was you, I'd keep this quiet and I'd have a little mapping exercise of what is actually happening in Pill and go and support those. Instead of that, she had done a public meeting and announced to the whole community that she had £1 million to spend. Well, people were coming out of the woodwork. People who'd never worked with young people before were just rocking up going, yeah, I've got this project. And she got herself into such a mess trying to unpick all these different projects. What's this, what's that? And I just thought if she'd have just focused on what is working at the moment, what has been historically working, talk to the community, and they'll soon tell you what works and don't work. And then if you support what works,
what's true and what's not true,
you might have a little better chance of kind of. But as urban circle, my experiences, and we'll all say every 3 years we've got to basically reinvent ourselves because the funding runs out of one project. They don't like to see the same project twice, so you've got to then come up with something else.
That's a challenge for like sustainability and forming that legacy, isn't it? Of those projects and those things you want to keep going and take forward.
And one thing with young people, what I find in my experience as a youth worker, and remember when I was a young person, is you like consistency.
Yeah.
You know, you want, if a youth club's there on a Wednesday, you want it to be there on a Wednesday, every Wednesday, not, oh, we've run out of funding now, so you're going to have to wait until we secure, and we're going to start another club, but it's not going to be a youth club, it's going to be something a little bit different. So you lose half the young people there, you've got to re-engage a different group, and
and it's going to be on a Friday.
and it's going to be on a Friday.
Sometimes Sunday, though, depending what the government says.
But
and it is about trusting us, really. It is about that element of trust. And if we've, like Urban Circle, have been around now for 15 plus years, proven track record.
Yeah, and a lot of those years were voluntary.
Yes.
Exactly, and even still now, we'll proceed to be voluntary because the need is there. If the need is always there, we're going to proceed regardless. So that's why it's with everything that you just said. That's why we need that level of support and the backing so we can proceed and have a level of sustainability then, because it's going to carry on being young people. The issues are still going to be there, and if they're not being backed and if they're not being supported, they're going to carry on growing and growing and growing. So why not have trust in those that have been putting the work in and doing what's been getting done to still start reshaping what we tend to see as lacking in support, as lacking in that education and lacking in progression. And when you said consistency too, I wanted to ask the two young people here for using AL, what have you had that's been consistent in the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years that's affected where you are today, or that you see as important?
What do you mean by like consistent?
Something that's just happened regularly. So, like Chris just said about even youth clubs, or even kind of whether it's anything music-wise or hobbies and things like that. That's
there was like a youth club in like Mains Glass, but obviously that just was like for like your mental health, and obviously to like check up on you. And then what's keep me going? Just like dance really, because I come here like every Monday and I just dance, and it just, you know, makes you like just, I don't know, it makes you feel like you're part of something, and you're not just staying at home, you're not cooped up inside, because obviously we've been going through COVID, and obviously that's affected people. It's affected everything really, and obviously dance has just kept me going, because I really enjoy dance. That's one of my hobbies. So obviously when I come here every Monday, it just brings me joy, and I have something to look forward to.
Exactly.
Because G Expression's a consistent organisation.
You can see straight away the impact there now. If that project was to shut down, and you've got X amount of young people who are coming there every week, what they're getting something out of it. When that closes down, what happens to those young people? And we never seem to think about the young people at the end of these monetary decisions that are made.
It's hard, man. Being in Arts Council, this is everything that we're talking about. Obviously, it's difficult. When
I was going to come on to you, Andrew.
Yeah, like, you know, people are so reliant on funding. It could be the end of an organisation if we decide not to fund them. You know, and I think for me, coming in without the kind of history and baggage of Arts Council, obviously I've been there just under a year now, but didn't have all the full context, and seeing who they've consistently funded and seeing who they're not funding, it's just been a no-brainer to me to just tell them, listen, the way everything's been done is just terrible. And just the process, how rigorous and how convoluted the process is in the first place is such a barrier to people. If you can't speak that language, if you can't write in that way, it's impossible. And as a small organisation, most of these big organisations, that responsibility is to someone else. They'll hire someone to fill out the funding application.
Well, I've heard that. I've heard the big we've got a big writer. For us. But it's more like
big organisations that can afford it, they just hire someone to fill it out.
The majority of voluntary organisations, small community-led organisations, people who have finished their day job and they're trying to
have time to fill out.
And then put in a 50-page application form for $5,000.
It's mad.
It is sort of crazy, and you do eliminate so many people that could do good work with young people just by the processes that they've got to go through to get any sort of funding. And I can understand when you say the schools, the amount of schools I've spoken to, and their budget is quite tight, and you want to add value to what they're doing, but that difficulty of not being able to take projects in there consistently is a problem. The amount of times I've gone into schools, you got 12 weeks. And you get a 12-week project work with a group of young people, and then you got to wave them goodbye. You start working on your sort of exit strategy about 3 weeks before the end, because you know.
I completely agree with that, and there's nothing more frustrating for me as well to see, I call them experiences, experience coming in. They shouldn't just do it for 6 weeks. It should be embedded. Completely agree with
and
you.
all of my projects that I deliver, obviously we only get 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. But some of the young people I've worked with, I've seen young people that I've worked with not come out of their shell until the 10th week. Then I've only got 2 weeks of really engaging with them, and I can't carry that on because the vending's done.
And also you start losing that passion in a sense because you know it's coming to an end.
Yes.
So you start to think.
So it's almost like I've got into it, but they're leaving next week, so it's like, what's the point?
It's that group work mentality, isn't it? Forming, norming, storming, and you know that you've got this group for a few little weeks, and then you know
the stages they're at.
The stages that they're at.
Again.
There is this thing, it's massive within the council, results-based accountability. So there has to be a tangible result to any sort of work you do with young people.
Yeah.
So, like, I've got a young person in youth club at the moment. What do they call it? She selectively speaks. So she'll not speak at all. And she's been in club now 4 weeks. She's not said a word to me. If she starts speaking to me in 2 months, like, someone's going to be asking me in the next 3 weeks, like, what's the outcome? I said, well, she hasn't spoken yet. Well, they can't measure that. So they'll tell me, you're going to have to stop working with her because we're not going to be able to get an outcome. And for me now, like, the way I'd like to work, I'd leave her alone, and she didn't speak to me for 6 months. That's fine. When she did speak to me, that is we've got there. But why am I being time constrained now?
It's qualitative, man. It's all about,
because they've got to be able to measure.
And that's how governments and agencies work. They need the numbers, they need the statistics. And they're telling this new way of working is not always that quantifiable. You're not always going to be able to put experiences or shift in people's mindsets, perspectives, hearts in a way that can be accurately captured by data. Why should things be outcome driven? We're so focused on the destination that you lose all the journey.
And I think somebody mentioned before earlier on, sometimes you can engage with young people, whether in school setting or in a community setting, and just to get through that initial barrier of getting to know that young person and getting that trust can take months. Some young people, it can happen within a day, you can get the trust, but there's other young people, it needs a bit more time. And I don't think they will be fully able to learn unless that trust is there. And if you're going to be putting pressure on whoever it is, whether it's a teacher or a community member, a youth worker, to get that relationship built within 2 weeks because you've got a 4-week window, and I just think we're just doing such a disservice to young people.
Can I just say as well, like, quickly, just before we wrap this up, yeah, obviously that's something is one of the good things about being a teacher, Andy, is that, like, as being a teacher, like, I know that I've built relationships in my education with teachers and, you know, children and like, you know, young people. They do get emotional at times because I've, you know, when like your favourite teacher has to leave, or when you're you know, you're moving class and you're no longer going to be, like, cause you build a relationship with that teacher because they've given you enough space but also enough time to be able to express yourself, and there's no, like, time within that, because if you have a time frame, like you mentioned, you're left with that guilt. Then you feel guilty in a sense because you think, well, that's not really fair now because I can't no longer give this person any more time to, you know, do what they need to do. And even if they do what they need to do, I'm not going to be there now then to be part of it. So you're left with that guilt of, like, oh, actually, maybe I could have helped that person experience it, but I've had to go now. So they'll experience it at a different time, not in that time frame that I wanted to do that with them. So then you sort of feel, you know, a bit gutted in a way, because you're like, well...
I've been in the job 20 years now, and the amount of time I sit down and you think, you're kind of reflecting, and you're always thinking, what happened to that young person?
Yeah.
I wonder how that young person got on. Because you've had that short space of time, and you know, very rarely do you get... I've done it possibly in youth club when I've been in youth clubs in Peel Light for 10, 12 years, so you do get the time to see that growth of a young person. I suppose school teachers all do that, see somebody coming at this year 7 and go right way through and see that growth.
That's the rewarding, yeah.
That's the reward, you know. Nyla's a reward.
Chris was my youth worker.
Yeah, you'll see those rewards, but those are sort of long-term things. But, you know, the ones that I always wonder around are the ones that we've started a project and we've had to pull out within 2 months, and you always think, oh, I was just getting close to him. If I'd have had a couple more months, I'd have been able to make that difference. But you always have that space in your mind, wonder what happened to them.
Yeah.
And growing through Newport, I'll see them as grown men now, and you're so glad to see them. And the first thing I'll say, you're doing all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you okay?
Are you okay? Like,
what did I miss out
yeah,
on? Like,
you've missed a whole lot of...
did I give you any bad advice?
You know, you were there at the start.
Yeah.
My last thing really is on that. With the Cynefin project that came in, one thing that I said right from the start was we need longevity from this, and it's no good you coming in for X amount of weeks and then that class experience it. I need to be able to deliver what's going on. Yeah, I'm not quite as cool as Joe and whatnot, you know, and probably don't get quite the experience, but it needs to be an element of that I need to, and it upskilled me. And so I guess if you're doing projects and things and you're creating projects, one thing from me would be to ask is there a way to make it, you know, so it's sustainable so that all the pupils can get these experiences.
And that's where this has been fantastic to hear, because it's just been about that research, about what mechanisms and what we need to put forward for those who the trust is already there, for those to be given the trust to proceed what they're doing. So then there is a level of longevity and there's a level of kind of sustainability for results to actually start coming and change to start kind of happening, and awareness going beyond the kind of that level of awareness. But I want to thank absolutely everyone for your input in here. I'll give a moment if anybody wants to say anything else. I think we're all good, but...
Yeah, sing us out.
Like the intercom, leaving music.
With this though, I think there is enough in here, and we will proceed in terms of carrying on how we show that we need to proceed with research. Research and development right now is so important for all of us here. So then we can do the work we need to do, and we kind of, you know, start making some of this change and start putting through all the solutions that we need to. So once again, thank you very much.
Can I just say I feel good leaving today?
Yeah.
Like I feel very refreshed in the sense I feel as though I've also been educated myself in the sense of not just knowing my experience but everyone else's experiences, not even just experiences but different perspectives, different job roles and like different life points, and like from the higher perspective but also from a lower perspective. So like yeah, it's good to be able to learn everyone's side things. teacher, speaker, youth worker, artist, on his mum.
Just on his mum.
Just his mum.
Just him himself.
Just him. He is on his mum, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
Excellent. Hopefully we'll do this sort of thing more often.
I agree.
Yeah, next time could we bring like a load of snacks, maybe, and like food.
Biscuits, tangerines and stuff.
Nah, I didn't really want to mention any biscuits.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it was really good to
I've got a head off.
as well.
Rush off.
We need some more.
It's